will try to talk a little louder here. It's a big room. Welcome. Good afternoon. Oh no, good morning. It's not afternoon yet. So in case you are wondering, this class is the one of many that Crestron is trying to talk about right now about the future of user interfaces in our company. Not from the hardware side. This is going to be all about software. So my name is Aris Safarian. I'm a technology manager here at Crestron. I've been with the company 18 years and have been working with Crestron products for about 28 years. So I've been working with our hardware for a pretty long time, since I was in college. I know a lot about our user interfaces, even though the technology is not part of my management at the company. I started with Crestron, early in the years of when we had, really bad touch panels back in the days when we would plug a mouse into the side of the touch panel to edit it. So I've been doing this for a while. So I share an office with the architect that is working on the HTML5, the new platform that we're developing. So I know a lot about this new technology. So I'm a good person to teach you guys or to explain to you guys what's coming and to give you kind of an insight in where we're going. So before we get into exactly what it is, I want to go over why we needed to change it, right? Because a lot of you have been using Smart Graphics for a lot of years. I was also a developer in the Smart Graphics team, so I helped develop a lot of the applications and a lot of the framework. I managed the VE team for Smart Graphics, so if any of you were active on labs, you would have seen me helping out with Matt Jugan, who's another person who's in Smart Graphics. So basically about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year, we started to collect information from you guys. So we started to collect the feedback that we were getting on the current user interface framework. We started to collect feedback from our support group, and we started collating that into a list. It was a list that we put together to figure out why we needed to replace our current user interface framework, right? So then we go to the business side of things and we present to somebody like Fred, who's our CTO, and we say, here's why we need to replace, the user interface framework. So I put together a couple slides that are going to list out those reasons why, and I think what you're going to see when you see this list is it's really going to reflect the feedback that we got from you guys. So as opposed to some people that believe that we don't listen, we actually do listen. Crestron does listen. We take everything that you tell us, we take it inside, and we actually do something about it. So I just want to go over why we needed to replace our current Smart Graphics framework. So the first thing that we realized is that the performance of this framework is just not good. And it's not good when we compare it to what your customers compare their touch panels to, right? So there's no way around it. When a customer goes to their touch panel in their house, they expect it to perform as well as what they're used to dealing with every day, which is their mobile device or their iPad, right? Some type of tablet. So our biggest challenge for you guys is to figure out a way to get that performance at the same level. Because it's very hard for you to sell hardware to a client who then goes to use it and says, well, I paid a lot of money for this and it doesn't perform as well as my phone, right, that I use every day. So performance was the top number one on our list. We have to figure out a way to give you guys a better platform, better framework, so that the performance is comparable. The second thing was startup time. So some of these projects take a considerable amount of time to start up in our touch panels. And although it may be considerable as a relative term, 30 seconds or even 10 seconds is a lifetime to an end user. It's a lifetime to you guys when you're trying to load a lot of rooms in your house. You have a large installation, you load a bunch of rooms, and now you're waiting before you can even touch a button on the touch panel. So we need to be able to find some framework where that load time is cut down considerably. So that was one of the other things that we had on our list. Memory footprint. This was an issue for anybody who has ever dealt with a 52 series touch panel, and you may have called support, and you may have opened a ticket where you said, hey, my client is complaining because they go to flip a page and it takes 4 seconds before the page opens up. You send the project into support, it would come into my team, we would look at the project, and we would determine that the project was too large for the panel. And essentially, what was being done was the background pages were being unloaded. In other words, we try to load the entire project up into memory, and if we can't fit it, then we unload things and then we load them on demand. So in the 52 series that had much less memory than the 60 series, that problem existed a lot. So this new framework should consume a lot less memory, right? So that was one of the other goals of this framework. The next thing we had is general resource consumption. If you can consume a smaller amount of resources in the operating system, it just means the overall experience of the applications running in that operating system are going to be that much faster. So again, this is one of, lower memory footprint and lower resource consumption, they go hand in hand. The next thing we put on the list was the ability to use a standard design tool. And this is a big one for Crestron. This is something that, as a company, we sat down and we decided that we want to try to get out of the tool building business. It's great that we can provide a tool for you guys to develop projects against, but at the end of the day, if we introduce a bug or if our tool has problems, it makes your job a lot harder. If we can provide a framework that you can leverage any tool, like an industry standard tool, it means that we no longer have to be the tool builder, or we no longer have to worry about the problems with that we may introduce into a tool. So if we pick a framework that can do this, it means that you guys can then pick whatever tool you want to use. So that was another one of our goals, to try to pick a framework that would leverage an open standard so that we could use a standard design tool instead of one that we provide. We also want to provide translation. So for those of you who may have international clients or clients that have homes in different areas of the world, right now it's very difficult to work with languages. Smart graphics does not lend itself well to have any type of translation. So if we could pick a framework that had that built in, that's great. So now you guys can easily deploy projects and have some type of translation ability with the project. In addition to that, I put this up here because the thread on labs is probably 50 pages deep at this point of complaints about why we can't put smart graphics on Retina. And so this is probably higher on the list. If you guys know Byron, who was a TM for the UI group, this has been a monkey on his back for a long time, and we have to apologize. So this is one of the things that we had actually as a goal for a new framework is how do we get support for Retina? How do we make sure that you guys, when you build a project, you can actually put it on Retina and it runs at the resolution of Retina, so you don't have any fuzzy fonts or any of that stuff. So we actually put that as one of our design parameters. We also want to be able to support custom fonts. So right now, you can install a custom font on your computer. You can actually use it in a VT Pro project, but that's where it stops. Like, you can't use it outside of the context of a touch panel. If you try to put that custom font on a mobile device, you can't use it there because it's just the way that our platform runs on mobile, and the requirements that mobile has from Apple and Android don't allow us to put custom fonts there. And it's because of the framework that we use. So this new framework should provide you guys to pick whatever font you want. Okay, so there's tons of really good fonts out there. No reason for you guys to use, Crestron's version of Sans Pro or whatever else we're providing you guys. This is another one that we've been thinking about for a very long time, and it's hotfixes. The current workflow that you guys experience today is that you discover a problem, probably at 4 o'clock in the morning on some customer site, and you're like, oh crap, when I go to my list control and I select an item, it doesn't select. This is broken. So you call customer support, you wait, you talk to somebody eventually, they open a ticket for you, and then that ticket comes to me, and then we go through in engineering, and we figure out when prioritize it, when it's going to get fixed. We provide the fix, we put it in QE tests it, then it gets deployed out into the field, but it gets deployed in the instance of a database update, right? A Crestron database update. So that means you guys have to get the database installed on your laptop, recompile the project, go to your customer's house, and reload every single touch panel there. That is a long period of time. That's unacceptable in the world of today that we live in. So this framework should provide the ability to push down hotfixes. In other words, we should have a platform that you guys use or that we run in our touch panels in our hardware so that when a fix is made by us, it's automatically pushed or pulled into the hardware. So you guys don't have to worry about it. You may not even know about it. So you may not even have seen the problem, or your customer may not have seen the problem yet. But if somebody reported it and we fixed it, it should get down to our hardware. So this is one of the goals of this platform. It's the same goal that we have for our drivers, by the way. By the way, that is my technology. I'm the manager for the third-party integrations and all the drivers that get built. So that's where we're moving with the drivers too. So when we fix a problem with one of our drivers, it should just push down to the ping hub. Just without you even thinking about it or know about it, it just comes down. So hotfixes for our components. And one of the other things that we've had a request in our backlog forever is mobile hardware support. Very simply, I'm a customer, I have a camera, I have a gallery. How come I can't take a picture of my kid's first day at school and make that the background image of my touch panels? Very simple request, right? There's no reason why we shouldn't have that support today. So that's another one of our goals with this framework. So that was a pretty large request from a large number of you guys. So we have that in your list. And finally, custom controls on mobile. So for those of you who have been developing in Flash, or actually have tried to develop custom smart graphics controls, you can build a custom control, you can compile it, you can use it in VT Pro, you can put it on the touch panel. That's as far as it goes. You can't take that custom control and put it on the mobile platform. And again, that's a problem with the framework that we use and the requirements of mobile from Apple and Android, right? So that was another one of our goals, to finally provide you guys the ability to create these really cool custom controls and finally leverage the application market for what it was meant to do, which is sell them to people that want to consume them, right? So that's one of the other requirements that we had. So what's the framework? Anybody who has been active on labs, this is no secret. It's HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. It's a really, really cool framework. It's very exciting for me. So aside from that list, why we needed to replace it, I'm going to go through some of the additional benefits that you actually get by moving to this type of a framework. First off, it's 100% cross-platform. Because it's web, it's going to run everywhere. Everywhere meaning that it'll run on Windows, it'll run on Mac, it'll run on Linux. So with a web-based framework, you don't have any limitations within the operating systems anymore. It makes it very easy for us to move that across, or for you guys too, to move that from different platforms, different operating systems. It's based on open standards. So what does that mean? It simply means that when it comes to training and when it comes to learning about this technology, we don't have to provide as much training as you guys need in order to understand smart graphics and touch panels and building things anymore. There are thousands and thousands of websites that are free even that will teach you about HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. Thousands of them. There's tons of really good information out there, and by basing it on an open standard, it means that you guys can learn a lot more than we will ever be able to teach you, right? So it's something that we don't have to invent at that point. It's something that we don't have to invent any new technology. We don't have to provide anything brand new. If we base it on an open standard, it's something everybody uses already. And it has years and years and years of background on it, meaning that it's been out for so long, you know, that a lot of the issues have been resolved, right? So basing it on an open standard is a really good benefit. It also provides a scalable interface. Right now, Smart Graphics is not scalable, meaning that if you have a project for a very small panel or let's start with a very large panel. You have a project for a 15-inch touch panel, you need to put it on a 560, it's impossible. If you do a save as in VT Pro, and you take a 15-inch touch panel, and you scale that down to one of our small touch panels, it's unusable. The text is not readable, the buttons are going to be so small, you can't even press them. All those problems go away with web technology. Web technologies have been built to scale from day one. Websites scale between my laptop and my phone. I can browse to the same website, and it may be rendered a little bit different on this device, and maybe the menu doesn't go across the top. Maybe it's 3 lines that I select on here, but it's scalable. Web technology is designed to scale. You will be able to finally create and manage one project. And we'll go over how you do that. It's something called responsive design and web queries. And I have a couple slides on it to explain to you what that really is about. So finally, by going to this platform, you guys will have a scalable technology to leverage one project. You won't have to keep a project for your mobile, a project for your 1060, a project for your TS1542, a project for your 560, 760, all these different files that you have to manage, it will simply go away. And you'll be able to leverage something like Git, where you can use a repository to then manage these projects. Web developers have been doing this for years, right? So you guys are going to actually become like micro web developers. In addition, we can use frameworks. Now, what Crestron is actually providing is a component library. So we're providing you guys the building blocks to build a touch panel project, which is what you do today, right? We provide buttons, sliders, list controls, text box. We provide all these components, but we run them in the context of our framework. So we compile them into a framework that we own and that we manage ourselves. With web, that doesn't exist anymore. We provide these little components, but you can actually pick a number of different frameworks to run those inside of. With web, there are tons and tons and tons of frameworks that you can run web components inside of. So the beauty of this platform now is, again, aside from you guys getting to pick the tool, you get to pick the framework. There's lots of them. Angular is a very popular one, Vue. There's a lot of frameworks that are available today that you can use to develop your touch panels with. And this opens up the gates for a number of different kind of things that you can do. So somebody may be more comfortable in learning Angular, somebody may like Vue. You can use React, which is what Facebook uses, React. There's lots of them. There are so many frameworks. Ionic, another framework. So there's a tons of these HTML5 frameworks that you can use our components in, or custom components. And I'll go through that. We'll go over that too. It's tool agnostic. As I said earlier, it's based on an open standard, HTML5. There are at least 100 editors out there for HTML5. Free, pay, Adobe Dreamweaver, right? That's a popular one. But we don't have to provide a tool anymore. Right? So, you guys will be able to actually find a tool that you like and use that for developing your user interfaces. Full mobile support, including custom controls. Right? So finally, you guys can build a really cool custom control, Joe's Crab Shack widget, whatever you want to call it, put it on the application market and charge money for it. All right, so how are you going to create projects? Right, that's the big question that everybody's thinking right now. Aside from, crap, I got to learn HTML5 now. So today you have VT Pro, right? So you can create a project in VT Pro. You compile it into a VTZ file, which if anybody's ever opened up a VTZ, that's just a zip file. There's no magic there. We just put our own extension on it. So it's just a collection of files. And then you use Toolbox to transfer that project to your touch panel. So what do you do in HTML5? Well, first off, before we, hold on, I'm gonna take a drink of this delicious cucumber and lemon water. Interesting combination. Before we dive too deep into HTML5, because I'm going to, your heads are going to be filled with questions and concerns as we start digging into HTML5. Because I realize if you were like me, if you had spent 20 years building touch panel projects in VT Pro, and I threw something like HTML5 on your lap and said, all right, you got to build a project using a web technology, which is like Greek, you're thinking, how are you going to do that? So first off, I want to make sure that everybody understands that how you build projects today using VT Pro and Smart Graphics is not going to change for a very long time. So in the foreseeable future for Crestron, as our platforms get better and faster and we release new touch panels, we will continually support, we will be backwards compatible with the existing Smart Graphics platform today, right? So, because imagine you have a customer's house, project's been running for 2 years, and the customer calls you up and says, hey, I added a couple rooms, I put an addition on my house, I need to put new touch panels in it. You guys go there and you're like, oh, crap, I can't get a 752, I can't even get a 760, they're gone, deprecated. I have to buy the latest and greatest touch panel from you guys, and if we only made it support HTML5, you would be screwed, right? So we have to make sure that we're backwards compatible so that as you guys need to add more hardware to your projects, you can do that. And we also need to provide backwards compatibility so that we provide enough time for you guys to start learning HTML5. Because there's a learning curve involved. If you're not a web developer, this is going to be brand new. So you'll be able to continue to use Smart Graphics. So you'll be able to use and support those projects for a very long time. So that's not going away. And in addition to that, as our platforms get better, as our touch panels get better, Smart Graphics is just going to keep running faster and faster and faster, right? As we change the CPU, as we get a better GPU, as we add more RAM, as our hardware gets better, Smart Graphics will just run better. So, at the end of the day, you will be able to continue using your existing project workflow. So that's not going away. So anyway, how will it be done in HTML5? Well, first, what you're going to have to figure out is whether or not you need a fully customized project, meaning that an HTML5 project that you guys start from the ground up. You need to figure out if you need to build something from the ground up because you want something 100% custom that you deploy to your customers, or if you can start with a template and just modify it. Okay, so that's what you have to decide on right off the bat. So for partial custom projects, Crestron is working with third parties to develop templates. The reason that we're working with third parties is because we need to have as many templates as we can possibly get out to you guys as fast as we can get them out. Meaning that when this new platform hits the public, and I'll go over when it's going to come to you guys live, we need to make sure that there's templates available for you to use. And the only way to do that is to leverage third parties right now. After that, Crestron will pull some of that in-house, and we'll start developing our own. But right now, the team is entirely focused on the core components for the libraries and the framework, the underlying code that we own that runs on the platform, like the communication layer stuff. So if you have a fully custom project, you're going to use some type of an open standard HTML5 editor. So it's actually a tool, instead of a tool that we provide, it's a tool that you pick. And I'll have some samples. I'll show you some really good tools that you can pick from. Then you're going to use any standard FTP or SFTP application to transfer the file to the touch panels. Cool part is things like FileZilla or QtFTP or WinSCP, all of those, that provides scripting. So you can bulk load. There's a lot of cool things that you can do. So using FTP is something that's actually a benefit to deploying large projects in a house. And then you can still use Toolbox. Just like you transfer a web mobility project today, so you pick a folder and it sends all those files up to the control system, it's no different for sending a web project. It's HTML5 project and a Xpanel web project. At the end of the day, it's the same type of files. It's just a group of HTML files and some supporting files that need to get transferred up. So, HTML. So, we're going to start talking about an HTML framework. We should probably have a basic understanding of what HTML is. For some of you, this may be completely brand new. You may have never right-clicked on a web page and said view source in your entire life. So you don't even know what HTML looks like. So if I'm not going to try to teach you guys an HTML5 class. If you're really interested, at the end of my presentation, I'll show you guys a slide that has websites that you can go to. You can start learning. But I at least want to show you what the page structure looks like. So this is typically, so if you went to a website right now, in Chrome, whatever your browser, if you right-clicked on that website, you said view source, this is what you would see. You'd see a page structure based in tags. Tags are simply objects that are enclosed in brackets. The greater than and less than sign, that's a tag. And that defines an element. So each page, each HTML5 or HTML page in general, starts with an HTML element and it ends with an HTML element. And the ending tag always has a /. And the stuff in between is what you get to see. The body is the stuff that's visible to you in the browser. So that's where our controls would go. So inside of that body, you would see our buttons, our sliders, our lists. That's essentially what you see. The examples that I put up here for H1 is a heading element, and P is a paragraph element. And that's basically it. That's HTML. There's no magic here. Start tag, end tag, there's a body, and a head. Now, in addition to HTML, we have CSS. So what is CSS? CSS stands for this, Cascading Style Sheet. You may have heard it. It's been out forever. It describes how the HTML elements are going to be displayed. You're like, oh, great, that doesn't really help me. All right, very simply. It replaces a Smart Graphics theme. Now you get it, okay? CSS is a replacement for a theme. It basically describes how everything's going to look in your project. That's what it is. And it has a very specific syntax. HTML has a syntax, has a way that you type things out. CSS has a way that you type things out. So I put an example here. And again, we're not going to go into CSS. This is not even CSS 101. This is like CSS 0.1. That's what it looks like. So there's typically a CSS file that gets loaded up by the browser. And then this is an example of a class. So dot center. And then we have the properties of that. Meaning that anything that's dot center, that's using dot center, is going to be aligned center, is going to have a color of red. That's basically it. So what are we calling this? Crestron is actually, when we first started talking about this at Masters, many of you maybe have seen this on labs, we were calling it Blackbird. Blackbird, when Crestron gives a product a name, or a technology a name, it's usually just used internally. We typically don't like to talk about it outside of the company. I don't know why we decided to call it Blackbird, but at the end of the day, we got rid of the name Blackbird, and we're simply calling it HTML5. That's it. There's no magic here, it's just HTML5. So it's designed to communicate with our control systems. Obviously, we can't communicate with our control systems if we don't have a technology. And it's essentially just a component library of HTML5 objects. It's Legos. So it's essentially the building blocks, the Legos, that you're going to use to build your project with. Now, the really cool part about using a web technology is that any of you that are web developers may be familiar with jQuery or Bootstrap. Those are two user interface frameworks that have their own buttons and their own lists and their own sliders. You can actually use those now. With this framework, you don't have to use our components. Yes, we will provide components for you guys to use, but at the end of the day, if you go to jQuery's website and you're like, Crestron's list control really sucks, I don't like it. I want to use the list control from jQuery, or I want to use the buttons in Bootstrap, because Bootstrap is really cool. You can do that now. That's really cool with this framework. It is pretty much like an open sandbox, right? It's not even a sandbox anymore, it's like just an open. There's no sides to the sandbox. You get to use whatever you want. So I put this up here because I want to make sure that we don't confuse what Crestron is providing, which are the components, with a framework, right? With a user interface framework, because you're going to take those components and you're going to stick them inside of some framework, in some type of web framework. Angular, Vue, whatever it is. I'll list those in a little bit. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And it's CSS based for theming. Now, what we're also providing with those individual components is a JavaScript library for communication with our control systems. Now, if you're a web developer, you're getting excited right now because now you can actually create a 100% custom project in whatever language, whatever framework you want to use, and communicate with our control systems with our JavaScript library. So that means that you can pick anything, whatever you want to use. You can build something that's 100% custom that looks like nothing anyone else has ever built in the world and leverage our communication library. So we're providing essentially almost like a software development kit. We're providing you some things, some Legos to build your projects with, but at the end of the day, you don't have to use those. But you can use our communication library, which is going to guarantee that the objects that you pick for your project can communicate with the control system. So this makes web developers really, really excited because they actually pretty much have an open platform to develop on at that point. So that's the communication library. So it'll run on iOS, Android, of course, touchscreens and on remotes. We'll distribute the applications for mobile just like we do today, nothing changes. And we'll have a desktop application. Xpanel EXE will have an equivalent in HTML5, and we'll have a web replacement, Xpanel Web. So nothing really changes, right? We're not losing anything, and you guys are going to gain a whole lot more with this new technology. So what are the components that we're going to provide to you guys? All the components are going to be called CH5, right? So it stands for Crestron HTML5. So it's a CH5 library. Those are the components we're going to give to you guys. We have a button, right? So we have to have a button. So we're going to have something that's called a trigger view, and I'm going to give you a live demonstration of a trigger view in a second. I don't know if any of you are in the room have made this request, but we have a lot of requests in our backlog where customers want to be able to swipe their subpages. And if you've tried to implement that in Smart Graphics, you have found it's very difficult, not easy, right? You have to layer things, lots of logic you have to put in the control system to make this happen. And at the end of the day, the overall user experience because of that is very poor. So probably, if anybody has tried to do this, you've probably removed it. So trigger view is actually allowing you to do that. It is an image carousel. So you imagine you're flipping images. You're swiping images on your mobile device, on your phone. Now replace those images with subpages. So now I'm actually swiping subpages. So I can swipe my lights page, swipe my media page, swipe my climate page. So now you can actually provide a really user user performance or user eccentric control that allow you to swipe those things in, right? So that's what the trigger view is, and I'll show you that live in like 1 second. I'll bring up something that's really cool. Slider, toggle switch. This is on every single mobile device today. We have to have a toggle switch. That's like just a cool thing to put on your touch panels for enabling and disabling things. We'll finally have a drop-down select box. This has been in our backlog for at least 4 years. And we'll have a single list control. So when we release these components, this component library, we're going to do away with this whole thing where we create these individual components based on whether or not they're horizontal or vertical, if they're checkbox, if they're dynamic button list. We're getting away with all that. It's just crazy. We have 9 types of lists in the Smart Graphics library. It's just silly. You guys will finally have a single list control, and it'll have all the properties that you need to whether or not you want to specify it as horizontal or vertical, checkbox, button, whatever. It's a single list. So we'll have a single list option. The spinner, we have that today, so we're going to provide a replacement for spinner, text entry box, and we have something new called an overlay panel. And this is if you've ever gone to a website, you click on something, and then something pops up over the page, and you can move it around, right? So you can move it around, you can dismiss it. That's what an overlay panel is. And it's a little bit different from the next object, which is a modal dialog. The modal dialog is like an overlay panel. The difference is the modal dialog has a fixed area for a title, it has a fixed area for a message body, and it has a fixed area for optional buttons that you can show. So there's a difference between those two controls. So those are new for this library. The other thing we're going to give you guys is something called a form group, and this is very simply the same thing as what you're used to doing when you create a new account on a website. So you fill out all this information on a form, you hit the submit button, and then it gets sent back to the web server, and now an account is created. Well, imagine if you replace that form, the submission part of that, instead of it going to a web server, it goes to the control system. So there's a lot of cool use cases for this, especially when clients are doing something like configuring an area or setting things up in an area. They can set a whole bunch of things, set flags, enter data, whatever, and then they can just hit the submit button and it gets sent to the control system all in one shot. So that's what the form group is. Okay. We're also going to provide a video control. Now, if anybody's a web developer in here, you already know that HTML5 supports video natively, right? So you're asking yourself, why is Crestron, again, reinventing the wheel? Why are you guys developing your own video control? Well, it's very simple. In the world of residential, where you have security cameras, any type of latency is a lifetime to an end user. When a homeowner hears a noise outside their house and they want to see that security camera, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, even 2 seconds is a lifetime when they want to see what's happening outside. With HTML, there is no guarantee of when that video gets rendered to you. So it could be 5 seconds, it could be 10 seconds, it could be 20 seconds. There's no guarantee. That's just the way that the framework deals with video. If we own it, if we create our own control, then we can guarantee the delivery of that video in the shortest amount of time. So that's why we have to develop our own video control. It's for the use case of security cameras, where we need to guarantee the video to get out to be rendered to you, or when rendered inside the browser, as fast as it possibly can be rendered. So we have to build our own video object. We also have to build our own image object. Now HTML5, again, has its own image object. HTML has supported images from day one. The whole point of having a web page is so you can draw images on it. So the reason that we have to build our own image object is because we need to provide an additional feature to support video cameras. And what do I mean by that? If you have a house that has lots of video cameras, you're not going to take a page, let's say you have a house with 10 video cameras. You're not going to take all 10 of those video cameras and put them on a single page as video objects, video streaming objects. If you do that, the latency of the video that's on that page, because remember, every single one of those videos is live stream video, the latency of that is going to build. It's going to be a very poor user experience. It's going to cause everything in the touch panel to slow down. But what you can do is put 10 image objects on that page and tell those image objects to refresh every second or two, and then point those to the camera's static. And every camera has the ability to output a continual JPEG image, right? So that's what you typically do with a security camera's page that shows everything. And then when you click on the camera, you would go to a page with a video object where you see the live video, right? So that's the reason that we have to create our own image object. So how are you guys going to experiment with this? So we're going to create something called a showcase app. This is nothing new. Anybody who had any company that has developed some type of HTML5 library of components like we're doing provides a showcase. The showcase is a live web page where you can play around with the components live. You can touch them, you can style them, you can experiment with them, all in the context of your browser, local browser. So Crestron is going to have the same thing. We're going to have a showcase application. So we'll provide a web page. We'll have all of our library objects on it where you can play. And you'll see all the properties, so you'll get to see if a button's, if it supports the colored border, thickness, all that stuff. You're questioning, what the properties are. And it's fully interactive, and you can modify the controls in real time, and you can experiment with CSS. So I actually have a web page live here of the showcase. So before you try to squint and see, why can't I practiced this before I got up here. All right, that's better. Yeah, I know, I need to get rid of my icons on my desktop. All right, so this is the showcase. Now, before you try to write down that address, actually you can't see that address anyway. This isn't live yet. So what I essentially did is before I came here, I grabbed the latest stuff out of our repository. I had Rich, who's my architect, build up a website. You know, that we're gonna, actually this will be deployed at some point live, but right now it's not live. So we just did this for you guys, so we can show you guys some cool stuff. So if you see on the left, right, so here's all the different components that we're gonna provide to you. And I apologize if this is really small, I'll try to make this bigger. So like, you know, and the name is incorrect. So Crux was the old name. Again, it's one of those things where we're trying to migrate into something new. Crux was the name of our component library prior to us renaming the entire thing as HTML5. So just ignore Crux for a minute. It should say CH5 button, CH5 list. So we talked about this trigger view, right? This is something that's really cool. So here's trigger view, and if I scroll down here and I can click on like the gestureable trigger view, right? So this is, you know, an image carousel, right? And I can swipe things here, right? So that's essentially what you guys are asking for, but you want it to be subpages. So the cool thing about a showcase is live experimentation. So if I go here, right? So each one of these tags that says trigger view child is actually an element that's inside of my trigger view. This represents a subpage, right? So as I said, with HTML5, there's a start and an end, right? And then here, in between here, this is my image, right? So that's the image. Now, I can come over here and I can do something like weather widget. And so I can pick like a weather widget here. Let's see, actually, let me go back to, I think I can use this one. Do this. And I agree, grab the code, select the code. All right, so I copy that, come back here, come back here, and I replace my image here with that code that I just found. And I select preview. And so now I'm experimenting, you know, with by adding my own control in here. So, you know, one of the benefits that I didn't talk about earlier with HTML5 is the ability for you to add these web widgets. There's stock ticker, weather, you know, all this stuff that used to take you know, RSS readers and stuff like that. All that took a considerable amount of time to develop in Smart Graphics using Flash, because those just didn't exist natively in that framework. It's different for web. Well, you know, with web, you guys can now simply copy and paste into your project really cool widgets like weather, like stock tickers, like RSS feeds. All of that now is possible with web, and you can experiment with it, you know, in this showcase. So you saw I just pasted this in. I can go through and paste in a stock ticker, and then I could, you know, imagine this trigger view was maybe on the top of my touch panel project, and I just swipe. Yes.
So will the processor do the interactive stuff like that on the web? So like say
not if you're just pasting in the web code in the UI. That's where an application would need to be developed. So if you need to send information from this widget back to the control system, that would require an application.
I'm just thinking like a lot of third-party integration now is all like block too. So like we're gonna have an interface on the front panel that the end user can then look up their nest or whatever, right? All from the front panel instead of having to break down this massive thing that they have to like manually type on the computer, right?
Yeah, OAuth authentication is something that we're working on as a company to build into our platform, meaning that the UI, the lower level that we own, something that we own inside the touch panel that's running at the native layer of the controls, the native layer of the operating system of the touch panel. There will be applications running there. OAuth is one of them. So yeah, so at some point we will provide OAuth type of application that you can expose in your touch panels. But what I'm showing here is just simply, I'm just copying and pasting a widget that is no different than if you took a web page and if you were a website owner and you wanted to show weather on the top of your website, you would paste this widget into your website. That's what I'm essentially doing. To interact, to get this data sent back to the control system, you could do that. Like if this weather widget provided its own API, its own set of functions, you could use our JavaScript library and then call into our JavaScript library and send data back to the control system. Right? So that gets into a little bit more custom work. All right. So this is the showcase application. So let me let's get back into our presentation here. So all right, 11:03. What time did I start? 10:15. Okay, I'm good. All right, communication. Actually, this leads into this is a good point. So now we're going to talk about communication. So one of the things that we're going to do finally that we've had as long as I can remember working with Crestron components, we have had requests from people who consume our applications and you guys, programmers, developers, to be able to communicate with our control systems using something other than joins. Joins are not efficient. Okay, they're just simply not. I mean, it's in order for you to manage a project that's filled with join numbers, you have to have some type of a lookup table somewhere. You have to continually, the user, the UI developer, and the programmer continually have to talk to each other. I just added a play button to my project. I gave it join number 10,000. And then he tells the logic guy, okay, I put the signal in my control system program, life is good. And the guy's like, oh, I just added some more controls. You know, here's the joins, here's the join range I set. There is no, in the web world, there is no reason to do that anymore. So ideally what you would do is you would put a button on your UI project and you would give it a human readable name, okay? Blu-ray player play. And then that name should be able to be referenced in your project, whether or not it's Simple Windows or Studio or Simple Sharp Pro. Okay, you should be able to reference the name of that and receive that press event based on its name, as opposed to trying to remember that it's join number 10,000 or join number 5,000. So we're going to do that. With this framework, we will finally be able to move away from joins and leverage signals. Now, how that gets into the Simple Windows workflow is still being worked out. So I will tell you, day one, we're not going to have this, but it's something that's being actively worked on. And the only reason that it's supported in the objects themselves, so when we ship our component library to you guys, it'll be in there, it's supported. But the problem is getting it into the control system so that it's easy to use, right? So that workflow of how you sync things back and forth. I make a change here, how does it show up in the control system? What if I want to do the control system program first? How does it get into the touch panel project? That kind of stuff. So that's the workflow that is difficult for us to do right now and is being worked out.
So are we seeing that the script would live on the processor or on the panel itself?
That's what's being worked out. Like almost like the if you're using smart objects with touch panels, right? You have the SGD file, right? And the SGD file basically represents that control that's on the user interface. So if you have like a keypad, if you're not using joins, if you're using names, and you have an SGD file that you link, you get a little you get a sub slot on your touch panel, and it has up, down, left, right. That we have to work out. Like, how do we keep those in sync? Because some companies work where the UI goes first and the logic goes second. Some people work where the logic goes first and the UI comes second. How do you keep those two in sync? And that's a difficult problem to solve for us right now. But anyway, it is being worked on, and it will be solved quickly once this framework gets out the door. So we want to be able to signal name. You'll still be able to use joins, right? So for day one, we're going to be stuck with joins for a little bit until we get the signal naming in place. But it's really cool. Why would you? Well, you don't have a choice. When I wrote this at the time, we thought we had this problem solved, but Nobody liked my ideas, so we had to go back, start over. Anyway, so that's what we're gonna use, we'll have joints. The other thing that's gonna ship day one out the door is a signal emulator. And you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, yeah, big deal, signal emulator, who cares? It'll be part of every single project. And in other words, it's built into our native framework, the application layer. It's built into every project. It uses a JSON file, which is just a text file. So it's a text file that you type out, and what does it do? It emulates the control system. So what does that mean? Well, what that really means is that you don't need to have a control system for the user interface to be developed anymore. You can emulate the entire control system, including very complex logic, using the emulator. So what are the benefits of that? Well, now when I go and I demonstrate a user interface to a client, I don't have to, number one, have a program designed at all. And number two, I don't have to bring a control system with me. I can just go to a client's house with a TSW 1060, plop it on a desk, power it up, and they have full interaction with the touch panel. You can have all kinds of things. You can have media player type interfaces where you have lists and things scrolling and swiping, and you can have live things happen where I touch a lighting preset and all the faders go up and down. All that you can emulate with this text file. Yes?
Will media player be a day one feature?
No. So what we're concentrating on now is, so in order for us to ensure that this platform is scalable, right, and performs well, if the base components, the component libraries that we ship are not done right or done correctly or not vetted, anything we build on top of that will be terrible, will be absolutely poor. So the entire team was pulled back off of application development and put into component development, right? So the entire team that was kind of like spread thin into everything they're working on is now concentrating on the core components. So not only just core components, it's the communication, right? The communication between the touch panel, those component libraries, and the control system. If all that is not good, anything we build on top of that is going to be terrible. So that's why. So unfortunately, when this ships day one, it's not going to have support for applications like, think of like weather, media player, like some of the other applications that we have. However, once that ships, and you'll see the dates, it's not that far away, the entire team will move over to application development, right? So that means we'll be able to take everybody and push them over to application development. The first one is media player. We have to replace media player. So that's one of our first things we're going to develop. Yes, that's a good question, and it's been on labs. A lot of people are yelling at us on labs. So yes, we know. Like I said, we do listen, we do watch labs, we do, even though you may not think we're in there, we're in there. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of CSS? So CSS, I went over it earlier, right? So for right now, you guys are thinking in your head, CSS is just themes, big deal. That's all it is. Actually, no, it's not. It's not really just themes. It's a lot more than you even realize. CSS is part of your everyday life in every single website that you go to, and you don't even realize what you're looking at. So CSS, aside from being able to change the look and the feel of a project without having to recompile, that's kind of cool though if you think about it. So right now you can't do theme switching in Smart Graphics. And the reason why is because the theme is part of the project. It's embedded inside of the project. That means that if I switch themes, I'm essentially replicating the project n number of times. So if I want to go, I think we got rid of the princess theme, but anyway, if I wanted to switch to the princess theme and switch to some other CT Neo, switch to Black Glass 2.0, you're essentially loading up 3 projects into your touch panel. It just doesn't fit. There's just not enough memory because those theme files, if you've never looked at it, they're enormous. Some of them are 14 megs and larger before we explode them, right? So that is a problem. Now with HTML5, things don't operate that way anymore because it's one consistent project, meaning that the objects are defined once, and CSS is used to tell the web browser how to show them to you. So you're simply going to have multiple CSS files or one CSS file that defines different themes, and then the project can be changed at runtime. You can actually do real theme swapping. So you won't have to, you'll no longer have this problem where you have to replicate your project n number of times. You'll be able to have an autumn theme and a spring theme, a summer theme, a Halloween theme, and a Christmas theme. You will be able to do that now with CSS. It's really exciting. You know, this is something that's actually really cool, and it's been a long time coming for us.
User selectable.
User selectable, of course. You're simply just basically telling the project, go get the CSS file, or go use this class from the CSS file. The CSS leverages vector objects. Now, this is important, and for anybody who has ever worked in CAD knows what this is. A vector object is simply, think of it as a button that can scale up as large as you want it, or scale down as tiny as you need it to be. And it looks exactly the same no matter what size you make it. So that's a problem right now with Smart Graphics. All of the buttons that you guys use in Smart Graphics are actual images, right? And what's the problem with an image? Well, the problem with an image is if you blow it up really big or if you shrink it down really small, it starts to break down. It starts to look really nasty at those different sizes. That's why in Smart Graphics, we have a minimum size and a maximum size for our objects. It's because they're not vector-based. It's because they're based on an image object. That's changing with CSS. CSS is 100% vector-based. And in doing that, you leverage things like the GPU, the graphics processing unit in the hardware, which makes things render really, really fast. The other thing that CSS does is provide an animation library, or provide the ability to animate objects on a page. If you have ever visited a web page and it has animations on it, meaning that things fly in and fly out, things fly from the left and the right, they zoom in, zoom out, that is a 100% CSS3. It's CSS and the GPU work hand in hand to provide animations. It's the only way that the browsers can render those really cool animations today is by using CSS. So we use the same technology. We're leveraging CSS3. It's the whole reason why the trigger view can be swiped really nice. It's the whole reason why you guys will be able to animate all kinds of crazy stuff. And there's a lot of information on the web. It's an open standard. So if you just typed in CSS3 animation, you'll hit 1,000 web pages that says, yeah, here's how you do an animation of something flying in. So there's a lot of really good information. And it's nothing, again, that we have to invent. All the browsers today support this. Custom fonts are also part of the CSS. So layouts, I talked a little bit about this earlier. So there's no way for you guys to manage one project today. It's just impossible. If you deploy projects to your clients that are 560, 760, 1060, TS1542, and mobile, there's no way you're doing this with one project. It's impossible. The projects just don't scale. You can't take a TSW 1060 project, load it onto a 560 and expect it to just look good. It's just not going to work. So with HTML5 as a technology, this is actually possible. And it's possible through something called a media query. And this is something that you've experienced today, and you don't even know what happens. When a web developer develops a website, they are using something called a media query. It's CSS, and they're basically defining how the website is going to look, render, how things are going to be arranged on the page and scaled based on what the device tells the browser when it opens up the page. So in other words, your project loads up in the browser, because keep in mind, that's this touch panel. By the way, you guys are going to come up here at the end of my session. Remember that trigger view I showed you? I have it running on here, so you can come up here and actually swipe. This is real. These are actual components from our library, and this is our framework running on here real. I brought it from the engineering office for you guys to play with. Engineers are the worst graphics designers on the planet. So this, and you guys know this. So this panel looks hideous, but it is a good example of what you guys can expect with HTML5 and animation. So come up here, at the end, swipe it, you'll see, play with the controls. You'll get an idea of why the animations are now possible. And this is a full page animation, which is really difficult. on the 1060. So this is a full page subpage that we're swiping in, which is the worst case, because typically you're probably going to have a header and a footer, and you're only going to be swiping the middle. Did you have a question?
Is that sample on or will be on the website soon?
Yes. Yep. So the media query, so essentially the browser opens up the web page, and it asks the device, hey, tell me about yourself. And this guy responds back, he says, here's my DPI, here's my resolution, here's my size, glass size, even glass size. And then, you'll have code written, or the template that gets provided from the third party will have code in there that says, okay, when there's this DPI that falls in between this range, when this size falls within this range, I want to scale the font to this size, I want to scale the buttons to this size, I want to scale this, I want to move the buttons over here, I want to change this. So essentially that's what a media query does. It allows your web page to load on all three of those different types of devices, because keep in mind, mobile site, tablet, that's portrait, right? So we're going from portrait to landscape, which is one of the most difficult things in smart graphics to do right now. It is terrible. There's just no way to do it. It's bad. I apologize. So media queries provide you the ability to do that, right? So you'll be able to finally have a portrait versus landscape project, and you'll manage it through the media query development. And this, again, is an open standard. This is something that if you typed in your browser right now, media query, I want to learn about media queries, you'll find a Udemy course, you'll find like tons and tons of websites that will teach you everything that you need to know about media queries. I learned in about an hour, and I have a website at the end of this slideshow that you can use, and you can do the same thing I did. Spend an hour on the site, you'll know everything that you ever need to know about media queries and responsive design. Yes?
Is swipe going to be available up and down as well as left and right?
Absolutely. Yep. So, all right, so that's a media query. And so layouts basically have responsive designs, and we'll talk about that. What is a responsive design? So what you're going to have to get your head out of, you're going to have to wrap your head around the concept of responsive design. So you guys have been working in VT Pro for years and years, same as me. You are in a pixel perfect world. Your mindset is that I need to draw a button on this page, and it needs to be this particular size, right? So in a TSW 560, the button has to be 75 pixels high by 150 pixels wide. That's the only button that's touchable, that makes it look good. So you do that. My text has to be 28 points in size on this particular device, and that's the only way it works. Web developers don't. If web developers had to work inside that world, nobody would be developing web pages. They just don't work that way. Web developers are working in percentages. They're like, okay, I have a view window, which is my touch panel, and my button needs to be 25% of the width of that view window and 30% of the height. And then within the context of that basic size, they can then set minimums and maximums. So you can set part of the CSS, as you can say, oh, and by the way, even though the button is going to be 25% wide and 30% high, don't go beyond X percentage, or don't go beyond X pixels in size. So that when I scale my project from a 560 up to a 15-inch panel, I don't have some button that's like this big and your client's going, this is stupid. So that's what we get. So you're going to be working, you're going to be freeing your mind from this pixel perfect world of development, and you're just going to be working in a relative world, which is actually really cool. It really does lend itself not only for scaling, but for how things get drawn on the page, evenly spaced and where they're placed. That type of stuff is how web developers have been working for years. So what are the development tools? So I said earlier, we're basing this on an open standard. So what this means is we're calling this like BYOT. So while you're bringing your own beer at night and you're working, you're going to bring your own tool. Crestron will have, we're working on training programs right now. There are going to be tools that we recommend, right? So Rich and I already have our own pet favorites that we like to build web pages. And Crestron will provide some things to work with those pet favorites of ours. So one of the really cool tools that's out is something called Visual Studio Code. This is not Visual Studio, so it's not like you don't need to go to Microsoft and get a license and download Visual Studio. That's not what this is. Microsoft has an open source editor called Visual Studio Code. It's free. And it's used for editing HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. It's a plugin based editor. So it allows us as developers or manufacturers to build plugins for the tool. It even allows you as developers to build plugins for the tool. So anybody who has developed in Simple Plus, you may have seen your Active on Labs, somebody built a plugin for Simple Plus for this tool. So this is a really nice editor for Simple Plus. So anybody who's worked in our editor and has complained that we don't have autocomplete for 25 years, now you get autocomplete in this tool, right? So again, I want to get out of the tool building business. I would rather leverage some of these open source tools where there's a huge thousands and thousands of community developers all contributing to this tool, right? So Visual Studio Code. So that's a really good one. Rich and I really like it. So we're building extensions for Visual Studio Code. So if you decide to build your HTML page in Visual Studio Code and you start typing ch5 dash, we'll have a drop-down list of all the objects that we support and you just hit enter, right? So everything will be pre-filled in for you guys. It'll make building a web page really simple. We're also working with third-party developers to bring some templates to you guys, right? So this is extremely important for us to ship this product, is to have the ability to use some templates, off the bat. Because building I won't lie to you, building an entire, imagine if you were a non-web developer, right? This is Greek right now. You're looking at this going, oh my God, this is terrible. Building a website from the ground up is kind of daunting, right? With all the things that you have to learn. It would be really easy if you could just start with an existing template, so everything's done for you, and then you go in and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I see how I need to change this now. You will learn a lot faster by doing that. So it's important for us to get templates out there. So we'll have some third parties that are going to be having some responsive templates. And at the end of the day, you can actually pick the tool that you want to use. There are lots and lots and lots of HTML5 tools. Some are free, some you pay for. It's all what you want to use.
There'd be no reason for, like, I use WordPress.
Yeah.
Creating that back-end side, have a tab that says clients that they log into, and it gives them an actual place to actually do their virtual path. And then create that code, and then drop it into whatever our hosting device is going to be.
Sure.
Right?
Yep. There's a lot by going to a web-based technology. There's a lot. Like I said, we're providing a communication library. We're providing a component library, but you don't have to use any of it, right? You can use anything that you want. You can build an entire native application and write in whatever language you want, and use our JavaScript library to send button presses to the control systems. It's really cool. So anyway, so these are some examples. So what are the supported platforms? So TSW X60, the iPad, iPhone, of course, Xpanel, PC, Mac, Xpanel Web. By the way, Xpanel Web, like I said, it's cross-platform, so you'll be able to run this on Linux for Xpanel Web. And like anything browser-based, right? DGE 100, 200, TSR 310, 1542, and mobile. Now, we got questions. We've had a lot of questions over the last few months, probably longer since Masters, of why the 52 series panel can't be supported with this HTML5 technology. And the answer is really simple. It just does not have the hardware that we need to provide the rendering speed. We will be, you guys will be right back where we are today. You'll have customers going onto their panel, comparing it to the mobile platform, going, oh, why does this suck so bad? I don't understand it. I have these 752s in my house, and you guys put this new framework on it, and nothing got better, right? And that's just the fact of that hardware. There's just not much. We can't do anything. We can't get to the GPU in that hardware. Yes.
Is this something that is up as an app, or is it served someplace on the browser?
No, that's a good question. There's a web server in there. So we're essentially, you're loading up, you're taking web files, putting them in here, which is a web server, and then we're opening up Chromium with, on an iPad. It's an app. It's an app. It's the same thing. The app is actually running like a web server. It's loading up those web files locally. Okay, so that's the platform. So what can I do to prepare? So you guys have all probably sat through the ping class at this point, so you understand some of where Crestron is heading towards and what we're moving towards. So that actually plays into whether or not you need HTML5 at all. Okay, so one of the things that you have to decide is whether or not a fixed user interface will work for you, right? And that's one of the things that I actually made a decision on with my own house. After 27 years of Crestron programming, you can imagine that my house has been custom since day one, because we didn't have anything, back in the early days. So I have continually been developing my own custom projects in Simple Windows and Simple Sharp for my house, and using VT Pro to create my touch panel projects over the years. Within the last 2 months, I actually sat down and figured out that 90% of what I was developing wasn't even being used by my family. So, I actually sat down and took a really good look at what I thought. Again, engineers make terrible user interface designers. So I actually sat down and I looked at how my kids and how my wife, how everybody was using my interface in my house, and all those really cool things that I put in the interface that I thought they would use, they never used. So I actually moved to a fixed platform like Ping, right? So I'm using Ping now at my house, and for anything that Ping doesn't support, I have an RMC3. I have like a hybrid, and I put all anything that's really custom that Ping doesn't support into a processor, and I connect those two together and they talk together. So you guys need to do the same thing. So before you embark on any type of, I want to learn HTML5, you need to determine if you do need to learn it at all. Because, if you don't need any custom user interface work, and if you don't need any custom logic, and now let's fast forward too, because I understand Ping doesn't have support for all of the devices that you need to deploy to a customer's home. That will be quickly settled for you guys. Again, that's my technology, right? I own third-party integrations and driver development, and I can tell you that it is an extremely large number of people working on new device types and drivers today. The team is massive. So we will close that gap very, very quickly. So, let's assume for a minute that Ping has everything that you need it has everything, pool and spa controllers, HVAC, whatever. It has every single control that device type you need. Let's assume that the drivers are there. You have to sit down and figure out, is there some kind of crazy custom thing that I'm deploying that I really don't need anymore, right? So at the end of the day, you gotta make money. And providing custom interfaces does not make you money. You want to make money, a fixed interface with things that you can turn on and off based on the customer's needs is going to make you a lot of money. Get in and out. So can you use certified drivers, right? Can I use the driver database? Then, you don't even need HTML5 at that point, right? So you can do all this in Ping. So that's the first thing that you should probably leave here asking yourself. Can you use Studio, right? So there's also another development platform that you can leverage is Studio, because my house migrated over the years from pure Simple Windows to Studio to Ping. That was my migration path. So if you don't need custom elements, now any of you that do use Studio, you're yelling at me in your mind right now, wait a minute, in Studio I can build custom elements, and you are right. In Studio you can add custom elements to your project if they are smart graphics based. Right? When Studio starts providing support for HTML5, it's going to be template based. There's going to be, remember, the editor, we're not building an editor for HTML5, there'll be no editor in Studio for HTML5. It will build a project based on the hardware that you define and the rooms and stuff that you define. Now, what I would imagine is going to happen in Studio is you will get to choose the UI technology that you want to deploy in a house. So you'll be able to start a project up and say, I'm going to use HTML5 for my touch panels, or I'm going to use smart graphics for my touch panels. Because remember what I told you, we're going to support smart graphics for a pretty long time, right? So I put this up here because, again, this is really about custom logic, not about custom UI. So if you need custom logic or custom drivers, if you have some Simple Windows driver, UMC, that you built for some piece of hardware that we are never going to build as a module as a company, then Studio is actually pretty good. It's gotten really, really good over the years, from where it was 2 years ago, from where it is today, and it will be released shortly with support for certified drivers. So it's in a good place. Okay, so then you can go to Studio. Next thing, so if Pink's not gonna work, you know, if Studio's not gonna work for you and you really wanna delve into HTML5, you should figure out if you need if you could use a template. Template is always gonna give you a really good leg up on developing a user interface, right? So if I need limited custom interface elements and I need custom programming, because with a, I can use Simple Windows and Simple Sharp Pro at that point if I want to use it, leverage HTML5. So you can do this, then you need to learn some HTML and CSS. You don't have to go crazy. You don't need to go in deep. You just need to know enough to be able to make changes. And that's what the benefit of using a template is, right? It should be structured in such a way that it doesn't require, you know, a PhD or, you know, a certificate in HTML5 development to make a change. So that's what you need to ask yourself. Now, if you're one of those guys, you're like, I have a web developer on staff, or, you know, my son's he's in school right now for web technology, whatever it is. I really want to dig into HTML5. I want to make my own custom interface. I love this. This is awesome technology. Then, okay, that's 100% custom interface. You really need to dig in, right? Start learning as much as you possibly can about HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. You need to start learning about the concepts of responsive design, right? So we went over that earlier with the CSS media queries. So one of the things that I didn't tell you is, along with the media queries for CSS, there's also a technology that's deployed for responsive design that's also based on CSS, and it's called Grid or Flexbox. And I'll give you guys a website. Oh, by the way, all these PowerPoint presentations Rich will put up on the website after this class. So when we get back to Jersey, this stuff will be available for you guys. So you need to learn what a responsive design is. How do I build a responsive design? If you understand Excel, if you understand what a table is, if you understand what a row is and what a column is, you can build a responsive design project. That is all you need to learn about responsive design. It's a row and a column. In the old days, before we had something like Grid and Flexbox, websites were built using tables. That's what they did in the old days. They built it using tables, because tables allow you to scale things pretty well. So, responsive design. In addition to that, and this is where the difficult part comes in, I talked about this earlier. We're providing a component library, but those have to go inside of a framework. Okay, what we're providing on the touch panels is not a UI framework. We're providing the lower layer that communicates with the control system, right? That part, you want to call that a framework. But all of the websites today, nobody builds a web page anymore where you have page1.html, page2.html, page3.html. That's stuff from 10 years ago. Web developers don't work in that world anymore. And the reason they don't work in that world anymore is because when you move from two different URLs, when you move from a page1.html to page2.html, the browser destroys everything that it rendered on page 1, and it has to re-instantiate or re-render everything that's on page 2. Now, as you can imagine, on a touch panel, that makes for a very poor user experience. It means that when your customer goes from the home page to the media page, there's going to be a flash. They're going to see black until the new object, until the entire page is rebuilt. A single page web application framework, like Angular and Vue and React and all these other ones that are out there, they prevent that from happening. They're built so that one page is loaded in the browser and elements are hidden and shown. So it works out it takes care of all the logic that you need, so that basically it's doing subpage management for you, right? So it's taking those elements, and as you go from one page to another, it's leaving things that are supposed to be visible, and only hiding what's going away and making other things visible. So that's what the single page web framework is. So you have to learn about a single page web application framework. And if you're a web developer, you know this already, because all web developers are developing in some type of framework today. That's just, and these frameworks are cool because they allow you to deploy to mobile very easily. So that's one of the cool things about these application frameworks. And you need to know how to package a web application. There's no magic in packaging a web application. You run all your web files through a open source application, like Browserify or some of these other ones, and it basically minifies all the pages. It strips out all the stuff that you don't need. It makes the files very, very, very small, because at the end of the day, you're building a web application. Just because you're serving it out of a touch panel is no different than if you were serving it from a web server. And if you're serving it from a web server, you want to get those files to your browser, right, your laptop or your touch panel, as fast as you can possibly get them there. The only way you're going to get them the fastest way there is to make them as small as possible. And that's what packaging a web application does. So that's what you're going to need to learn about. You're going to need to learn all about that. So, good places for information. One of the most popular websites on the planet for general information about HTML5 and CSS and even JavaScript. I mean, it's just, that website is, if you ever did a search on HTML, that website's on the top of every search. It's where everybody goes for basic information. It's a pretty good site. This is the site that you're going to go to. Interneting is hard if you want to learn about responsive design and FlexGrid, right? So FlexGrid is the technology that's used for responsive design. There's actually two. There's one called Grid and one called Flexbox. I learned Flexbox only because I was using Bootstrap Studio for a little while, building web pages, and it used Flexbox. This is a really good website. I spent an hour on this website. That's all I did. Had a beer, went to this website, and within an hour, I learned everything that I needed to learn to actually create a responsive design in a media query to build a scalable page that went from mobile to any size browser that I wanted. It's a really good site, really good pictures. A lot of their pictures I put in my presentation. So this is a good site to use. If you want to learn about JavaScript, this is a really, really good site. This site will start you from the very beginning, hello world, take you through as many projects as you want, depending on how deep you want to get into JavaScript. It's really good with teaching you about JavaScript. It's a really good website. And then if you want to learn about a single page web application, two of the most popular ones right now are Angular and Vue. If you're a Facebook guy, you may be in React. There's Ionic, there's a whole bunch of them out there, but these are the two popular. Angular 6 is full featured, really, really. It's a meaty UI framework. Vue is a lot less meaty. It's lightweight. I find it easier. Internally, for whatever reason, Crestron is using Angular. Myself, I use Vue. I've been using Vue for a year or so, I really like Vue. So those are two really good single-page web apps. Okay. So when can you guys have this? So we're going to release in stages. The beta, we're currently in beta, so it's Q4. You simply have to reach out to customer support or Byron Wendling, if you know Byron. You can email him for access to the beta. But keep in mind, we're not providing a tool, and we're providing a very basic build. We're providing Legos, right? So if you're just delving into web technology, the beta is not going to be helpful for you at all. You need to have a little bit of basic understanding of web technology and web development to really get anything out of the beta. Because we're not going to have templates yet, right? So there's nothing, I can't give you a template and say, here, go load this up in Angular and modify it. So, if you're going to be involved in the beta, just make sure that you understand a little bit of web technology and you know how to create a website and web page already. So the public release is planned for Q1 of next year. Okay, so that's our current schedule. So I want to leave you guys with one thing. Do I have time? Oh boy. What time is this class over? 3 minutes. All right, cool. We have time. All right. I want to go over responsive design because I want to show you guys, how cool this is and how easy this is. Because right now you're probably thinking this is really, it's all crazy stuff you're trying to teach me. So yeah, I talked about this earlier. We use HTML, CSS. We use some type of a layout system. Grid or Flexbox. Those guys are like Coke and Pepsi. They constantly are online telling each other that they suck. So you can pick one or the other. That site that I sent you guys to, Interneting is Hard, they talk about Grid and Flexbox. So choice and personal choice. So it supports the media queries. So that's basically what responsive design is. But really, what is it really? So I'll just go through an example of how this works. So this is a layout that I was given from my graphics department before I went to masters, before I went to teach masters. They're like, this is the layout that we want you to replicate in a web page. So I went to at the time, keep in mind, at the time I knew nothing about responsive design, web queries. I didn't know anything. I'm like you. I was sitting in the audience not knowing anything. So I had to teach myself what it means to actually create a responsive design. So I went to Interneting is Hard and I read up on it and I figured out, oh, it's just breaking your interface up into rows and columns. That's what it boils down to. So I take a look at this, and the first thing you do is you take a look at your layout and you're like, I gotta break this layout up. So I looked at this and I started with rows. I immediately said that I have a big row on the top, and I have a small row on the bottom. Right? So those are my rows. I've defined a row along the top and a footer row along the bottom. So you start with rows and you go to columns. You go to rows, go to columns. You keep working in until you can't go any further. That's basically what responsive design is. So then I broke up the top row into 2 columns. So I did that because on the right-hand side are presets, lighting presets. So that lends itself to a single column of controls called presets. On the left, I had different types of controls. I had a room selection along the top, I have a master raise and lower, and then I have individual lighting loads. So I can't leave that column on the left like that because it won't scale well. So then what I did is I broke that up into individual rows. So I created a row for the top, and then each individual lighting load had a row. And at this point, you could have changed the individual lighting load row to a single row and just put a list control in there, right? So you can put a list control and just scroll through the list. But for the purpose of me learning FlexGrid, I did it this way. And then what I did is I broke up the top into two columns. And basically that's it. Once you have everything broken up, then when you go into HTML5 and you start defining your rows and columns, you'll know exactly what to put in. Right? So this helps you define what controls you're going to put in that flex grid. And that's the essence of responsive design, aside from doing the media query stuff. One thing I want to show you, because you guys need to get to lunch. One thing I didn't show you was this website here. So we are hoping to have almost like a demo website where we'll have sample subsystem layouts for you to show to clients, right? So in other words, we hope that we have, you see that we have something here called lighting, shades, and climate. So we hope to have something like this for you guys to go to demonstrate, what our component library would look like, if you put it onto a touch panel and provided the theme for it, right? The CSS theme. So you can see, if I touch this, things that you take for granted on a web page, things just slide in and out. You're used to that, right? You've seen that for years. This is what the framework does for us now, right? So this is the CSS. I talked about CSS providing animations. This is a CSS animation, and it's simply sliding things in and out. And we take that for granted because we see it every day on the web page and we see it on our mobile devices, but now we can actually provide that on the touch panels, and it creates like an organic experience on the touch panel. So, I just wanted to show you that because that's what's coming, so that you guys, understand. And you can, I don't remember the name of the website. There's a website, if you just typed in CSS animations, you're going to come to a website where it basically provides a sample of all the different types of animations that you can create with CSS. So it'll show you things that fly in from the left, fly in from the top, almost like PowerPoint kind of stuff. So you'll get an idea of what you can do. It really is unlimited. CSS is pretty much an open sandbox for animations. It's just a bunch of configuration settings that you define, and then the animations work. So I would, I don't know, we have time for questions. Should we throw a thing out, or I can probably hear you guys? I definitely want you guys to come up before you go to lunch and at least touch the touch panel. That sounds silly, but come up and touch the touch panel. But you know, I'll answer questions. Anybody, any questions you guys have? You know, you guys, just you can come up at this point, and I'll answer questions. Yes, go ahead. Uh-huh. Yes, yeah, because we have to build, just like we built an Android APK, because that's an Android device, we still have to build something that runs. Yes, that's correct. Yep. No, it's no different than it is today. Right? The Crestron app is available in the App Store.
Remember Dean? Fred.
Hey, Fred.
No, at one point in time.
No, that's different. You're still going to either. I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe we didn't communicate that. Just like we do today with the Smart Graphics app, you load those files onto your control system, and the customer points the app to the control system. That's the same thing for HTML5. That's no different. Your project files are still going to live in the control system. They're going to load up. They're going to open the app up. You're going to fill in the information, and you're going to say, "Oh yeah, you point to the control system to pull the app, to pull the project files." Yeah, the app. What I meant is that the app. Just like you have to install an app today for Smart Graphics, you're going to have to install an app for HTML5. But the project still lives locally. Or you can send the files to the local device, the customer's device, just like you do today. That workflow doesn't change. Uh-huh. Here's lighting. Lighting isn't as cool as lighting isn't cool as shades. We don't have ramp control. We don't have ramp control blocks enabled yet, and that'll make the sliders like slide up and down instead of like jumping. Oh yeah, I think that's there. Sure. So as I scroll this, right, the percentage pops up. You can choose whether or not you want that to show. That's part of the properties of that object, the slider object. You can choose whether or not you want to show it on press, or whether or not you want to show it all the time. Whether or not you want it in the center, left, right. There's the component library that we have. The component library that we have is really what? The component library that we have is really good. It's off. It's a, yeah. Oh, you power locked me.
When I had hired a company to build my website, they basically said, you know, there's Joomla, WordPress, and like one other one for like serving up web pages. And they didn't mention, I didn't realize that Joomla was like one of those things.
So it's just
Yeah, but I'll set up.
internally Yes, that's what I expect to happen. What's been defined by Crestron.
We won't, the UI designer program, I'm not.
No, you know more numbers. It'll be, so Crestron will pick the join numbers under the hood, right? And what will be reflected to you will just be the signals. It could use join 7,000, but you don't care because you're not talking joins anymore. We're mapping the signal to the join under the hood for you, and then reversing that on both sides.
And then you don't have stuff spread all over.
Yeah,
4,000.
we're talking,
You try to like block things out.
we're gonna have, we're talking about supporting groups, so you can create like a blue ray group, and then also within the concept, almost like you build a UMC, you
Yeah.
expand flags. That's what. Yeah, we're just having a hard time getting everybody to agree on how it's gonna work. That's not your problem to solve, that's. Yeah, this works, I don't know why, so Rich made stupid thing too small. This drop, yeah, if you get it right, I totally change the size.
Yeah.
The response is pretty good, and this is, the button page is basically showing, you can hardly see it, but it's basically showing how quickly you can render from the controls. Yeah, how quickly you can render that. Now, if you did that, this, you're like, oh, wait, that sucks. Well, if you put it next to a smart graphics panel, you actually really see how bad it is.
Yeah.
And the next generation of panel, this is almost instantaneous. Like that test there, you don't see what like different.
Is the
Everybody talk about it.
smaller orders?
I can't. If I tell you, if I say anything, I will snap. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep. The video, even on this side, video. It's really yeah, you can do the iframes, you can do iframes, you can do a project where you can anything you can do, so Chromium is really, think of it as just Chrome. Anything you do for Chrome, this is Android and it's running full-time Chromium web browser, just it's just that's a custom control, but I think there's if you search for draggable HTML5 control, they're already out there. Like there's a bunch of people who are already developed. So you can use that in an existing project that you're developing an Angular 6 or Vue or whatever. You can paste their code in. Draggable control. There's for list controls, it's typically used for list controls. You want to remove something in a list, you press it and drag it up and let go. That works natively. If I take a slash and paste that JavaScript code in, I show you it works. It works, you can drag it up. That's just all built, that's all that type of stuff is short to create Flash and action script. So it's possible. This platform is easy. Huh? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, this is why.
It's exciting for me only because I've been doing this so long, and I've seen the migration and the lack of movement in user interfaces. When we started working on this, I started to get excited. And the learning curve is extreme. People that have been doing BT Pro for 20 years. I don't think they'll ever move over to this. It's going to be tough for them. But for people that do dig in, the payout is really good.
I mean, I'm no good at, I'm an engineer, I'm no good at user interface design, like you said. I mean, I buy templates
Right.
from people, and then I can go and I can tweak them.
That's exactly what.
I guess what most people do.
Yeah, the templates are. We have some really good third parties working on templates right now. Really
No, but there's always the artists out there, but I think that's a small number.
Right.
They're just gonna go out and build their own thing.
Yep.
But it's cool, because we'll see some really good ones.
Yeah, you're going to see. Right. So you're going to see some really interesting user interfaces built now, because now you're no longer stuck inside of a framework that we gave you. Now we're basically giving you a component library, but you don't have to use my stuff.
Just the demo where you just went in and just grabbed a little code, snippet, and pasted it